Well, health and safety is the number one thing that everybody's looking for here. So a vaccine or a treatment is something that we're all looking for. But I'd say more importantly, we know that we need to get the economy back and we've got to get people back to work. And that's why we focused on using our experience as an essential manufacturer and our experience in working right through the pandemic to try to help other companies with their return to workplace playbooks. So
Jim, on that note, I mean, what are the key things you've learned from that? Sorry, Sarah, that you're able to share with other companies as they perhaps go back to work for the first time?
So we've got about 14,000 of our 37,000 employees that are reporting in every day to our sites. We've taken non-essential personnel and asked them to work from home, which is working fine. As those 14,000 come into work, we practice very strict physical distancing. We wear facial coverings when we come back into the workplace. We do screening every day when somebody comes to work. We ask them questions about their health, about where they've been, if they've traveled somewhere, if they've come into contact with somebody with COVID-19, and we take a temperature screen. If somebody doesn't pass the screen, they don't come on site. That protects the rest of the workforce. If somebody needs to be quarantined, they go home for 14 days. We pay them while they're at home. And then once they're clear of symptoms and pass a test, they can come back to work. If somebody has come into contact with somebody with COVID, even if they're not showing symptoms, a lot of times we'll ask them to quarantine just to be safe.
Do you pay them if they do test positive or if they're not feeling well or have symptoms? Because one of the issues is, you know, as employers, you don't want it to be punitive if they have to miss work for being sick.
We pay them. You know, this could happen to anybody. And in our culture and in our principles, the way we treat people, we do not want to discriminate against somebody just because they happen to have come into contact with COVID-19 or have the symptoms. So we pay them. We ask them to stay at home. It's the safe thing to do. It protects the rest of the workforce. We also do contact tracing. So we will have a health services professional do an interview with that person and find out if they came into contact with anybody else at work. And as a preventative measure, we might ask somebody at work who's come into contact with somebody with COVID to go home for 14 days just to be safe.
When you think of non-essential manufacturers, Jim, who will be weighing up whether to reopen or not, do you have some sympathy as to how hard it will be to make the decision? Do you think the guidance different states or the federal government are issuing is clear enough?
Well, I've been involved with the Michigan Economic Recovery Council, which is Governor Whitmer's council, to get the state of Michigan opened up. In that, I had the chance to work with many different manufacturers, including the big three auto manufacturers. So GM, Dow worked together a lot on these return to workplace plans. There's a group that just came back to work on Monday. They had a week last week, which was a reorientation for coming back to work. And that went extremely well. And of course, these were workers that were getting paid unemployment, you know, to be at home. But they want to get back to the workplace and they want to get back to work, and they just need some assurance that it is safe to come back. And so I'll give you Dow's experience. We've had 70 cases since the pandemic started, and 61 of the people have recovered and come back to work. So it is manageable. You can create a safe work environment. You can protect the employees, and it can be safe. We're not asking people, you know, when you're not at work, stay at home. When you're at work, stay at work. If you leave work to go get lunch and come back, we're going to screen you again and check you again when you come back in. But the reality is it is safe to go back to work, but it isn't the same as before the virus. We've got to take precautions.
Jim, how do you handle people with underlying conditions or people who are older than the age of 60 who have a higher risk here against COVID-19?
So before anybody comes back into the workplace, we'll have a discussion with them about what's expected from a safe work practices perspective. We'll also talk to them about their individual situation, obviously bearing in mind privacy is very important. We don't want to put high-risk individuals at risk, and so we'll take that into account. If they need to stay at home and do work from home, we'll try to make arrangements to make that happen. That is one of the things that we're very sensitive to. the other thing, quite honestly, we're not talking about in the early phases of going back to work in the offices, because right now we're working virtually pretty well. And in office space, especially where we have open office concepts, we've got to do some work to figure out how we're going to manage traffic patterns and seating patterns to keep physical distancing.
It's a good snapshot of what companies are trying to figure out. Jim, talk to us about demand. You're a pretty good benchmark for global GDP. What are you seeing all over the world as countries do start to reopen? And what do you project as far as how fast we can see recovery?
So in our packaging and specialty plastics business, which goes into many consumer goods, food, nonwovens for hygiene and medical applications, those volumes are holding up really relatively well, well compared to first quarter where we saw hoard buying, and well compared to last year. In our industrial solutions business, which is intermediates for cleaning, solvents, hand sanitizers, et cetera, that business is holding up really well. As you get into durables and our polyurethanes business that touches the automotive industry, and remember, most of the auto industry has been down for months here, those numbers are down maybe 20-30%. And we see that in construction. Construction just now is starting to come back. In our business that goes into paints, our coatings business, the do-it-yourself market has been very good. So people have been home and they've been doing do-it-yourself projects, probably the best do-it-yourself numbers in 10 years. But the contractor business, the construction business has been slow, and that's just starting to open up. I think April, May in the United States will be the slowest months. I would say the same in Europe, and then June will start to pick up. If China is any indication, the Chinese industrial economy is back to 80 to 90% of pre-COVID levels, and we see a gradual, steady increase. I would say the consumer demand in China is lagging that a little bit. The consumer demand is a little bit uneven because people are still staying at home more than they're going out. So I think it's going to take a little while for auto sales to match auto production, or appliance sales to match appliance production. But we're making gains on it. And then the other area would be mobility. In the States, if you look at the Google or the Apple mobility tracker, we're back to within 5 to 10% of last year on people moving around. So we are starting to see a return. Some things are coming back sooner than others.